Welcome to JLM University. My name is Alex. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to replace the steering motor on your Power Pole Move ZR. For a list of recommended tools, please see the description below. And as always, the first step before doing any repairs on your Power Pole Move is to disconnect the power. The first thing we're going to do is remove the handle from the rope by using our screwdriver to press out the top cap. Use the screwdriver to push at the bottom of the handle. Be very careful not to push up into your hand. Make sure your hand is free of this tab. So from the bottom, push, just like so. Now we have the cap out. Use your pair of needle nose pliers to grab the knot and pull out of the handle. Now that the end of the rope is free, use the pliers to pull apart the knot, just like that. Go ahead and pull the handle off of the rope. For the next step, we need to put the Power Pole Move into the partially stowed position to access the rope. Now we are going to pull the rope through and unwrap it from the pin and the wheels on the lock bar. Always be careful when working on your Power Pole Move trolling motor in the partially stowed position, as there are a lot of pinch points within the trolling motor. We do recommend using something to sit underneath the bottom arm to prevent it from coming down. Pull the end of the rope with the heat shrink attached. This is going to allow slack to where you can pull the rope out from itself. Now that the pull rope has been removed, we are ready to remove the navigation head. We are going to need to access the 7 brass screws that are running along the bottom here. For this video, I'm going to go ahead and raise it up so I can show you easier. Okay, now that we have all 7 brass screws removed from the bottom of the navigation head, we're going to go ahead and simply lift up. And you'll see it's just connected simply with this white connector. All you have to do is push the middle of the tab here, simply unplug. Alright, now that we have the navigation head removed and unclipped, go ahead and unplug the Lowrance transducer cable from your Lowrance unit if you are running the ZR with the built-in transducer. From here, you're going to push up on the transducer cable, removing the rubber plug from the wire, and push down on the wire to bring it around the clip, as so. And then go ahead and pull it up and out. Now, using your number 2 Phillips screwdriver, remove the 4 brass screws holding the mold over clamp in place. Now lift up on the mold over clamp and feed the wires through. Next, use your 9/64 Allen and ratchet to remove the 2 screws holding the navigation head clamp. Now that we have the 2 Allen screws removed, we're going to use our flathead screwdriver and pry the collar out of the shaft. Now the next step is to go ahead and pull up on the coil cable plug and remove it from the shaft. Okay, now we're going to lift up on the navigation base and feed the wire through. Now that the navigation head is removed with the coil cable unplugged, partially stow the Power Pole Move ZR, allowing it to rest against the pivot arm. Once in this position, release the shaft clamp and carefully pull the titanium shaft through the steering motor housing, supporting the weight of the motor. Now remove one of the 3/8 E-clips using your flathead screwdriver that hold the lower arm pin. Once the E-clip has been removed, support the weight of the steering motor as you knock the pin out with the rubber end of your hammer. Now that the pin has been removed, support the weight of the motor and lower towards the deck of your boat. Now that you have the arms separated, remove one of the 3/8 E-clips holding the interference bar in place. This is going to allow you to slide the bar over and access the steering circuit board. Now with the interference bar slid over, remove the Phillips screw that holds your steering plug to the steering circuit board. Now use your flathead screwdriver to pry the steering plug away from the steering circuit board. Now, using your number 2 Phillips screwdriver, remove the 4 screws holding the steering circuit board in place. Now that your 4 Phillips screws have been removed, remove the steering circuit board from the steering motor. Now remove the last 3/8 E-clip to pull the interference pin free. Now remove one of the 3/8 E-clips. This is going to allow you to drive the remaining pin out as you support the weight of the steering motor. Now tilt the steering motor forward and pull the coil cable retainer off. Lift the steering motor up. Now we are ready to begin the steering motor installation. Position the steering motor with the shaft clamp facing upwards and align the tabs on the back of the coil cable retainer with the holes at the top of the steering motor. You should feel and hear them click into place as you press down. At this point, ensure that the steering plug stays on this end of the steering motor, and you're going to turn the steering motor down with the bushings closest to the edge of the coil cable retainer and align to the bushings at the end of the upper arm like so. So we're here, we're going to turn down and align that bushing with the bushing on the outside of the upper arm. Now take your pin with the 3/8 E-clip attached to one side along with your bushing. Now gently tap the pin through the housing. When you're doing this, make sure that you have the steering motor housing properly aligned with the upper arm, as you do not want to damage the internal bushings while using your hammer. With the pin in place through the upper arm and holding the steering motor housing, remember to attach your 3/8 E-clip and bushing on the other side. With the pin fastened on both ends, turn the steering motor down. Now run the interference pin through the hole at the middle of the steering motor housing and secure one of the E-clips to the inside of the steering motor housing. Now install your steering circuit board. Make sure you have the screw hole for your steering plug facing upwards and the 3 tabs on the circuit board to the left. Align them with the 3 tabs on the steering motor itself. Before inserting the steering circuit board into the steering motor housing, ensure that you have placed silicone grease along the rubber seal. With your steering circuit board seated into the motor housing, take the 4 Phillips screws with lock washers and tighten to 7 inch-pounds. Now we are ready to plug our steering wire back into the steering circuit board. Before doing so, ensure that you apply dielectric grease to the terminals on the steering wire plug. Now using your number 2 Phillips screwdriver, insert the screw through the plug and steering circuit board and tighten snug until you see the rubber slightly compressed. Now it's time to slide the interference pin across over top of the steering wire and above the coil cable. Once you have it slid over, secure it by locking in the final 3/8 E-clip. Now raise the steering motor and upper arm back in line with the lower arm. Now with your steering motor aligned with the lower arm, take the pin and run it through. Now with your pin pushed all the way through, lock your 3/8 E-clip into place. Now feed the top of the titanium shaft through the steering motor housing. And if you have the transducer model, start by feeding the cable first. Once you have the shaft in place, tighten the shaft clamp. Now we are going to put our navigation base back onto the titanium shaft, starting with our transducer wire, if you guys have a transducer model, and feed it through like so. And it's going to rest on the top of the titanium shaft. Now we're going to take our navigation head clamp and line up the tab with the hole in the titanium shaft. You'll actually feel the navigation clamp lock into place once it's pressed all the way forward, like so. Now that you have the clamp locked into place, go ahead and feed the socket head screws with the brass nut, nylon nut on the back side, and get them started with your fingers. Just go ahead and push that through and put your nut on the back side. Now that you have the socket head screws in place with the nuts on the back side, remember to use your torque wrench and to tighten down to the listed torque specs that can be found in the instructions. Now insert the coil cable plug into the top of the titanium shaft. When pressing down on the coil cable plug, make sure that the vent tube is lined with the notch on the side of the plug. And if you have the transducer model, make sure your transducer cable is also lined up on the opposite side of the coil cable plug. Next, we are going to route the transducer cable through the mold-over clamp. Now we are going to route our power connector through the same slot that our transducer cable is going through. And also the top of the vent tube is going to sit in this slot as well. Once we have it down, our screw holes will now be lined up. Now secure the mold-over clamp by inserting your 4 brass screws, and make sure that you are using brass screws, as this will prevent any possible interference with the navigation. Now that the mold-over clamp is secure, we can route our transducer cable through the bottom of the housing. Remember to reinstall the rubber plug, as this will help prevent moisture from getting into the navigation head. Also, make sure the transducer cable is routed on the side of the mold-over clamp underneath of the retainer. Now we're ready to plug in the navigation head. We're going to take our white connector here, line it up with the tabs. You actually hear it click once it's all the way in, just like that. Now, the one thing you do want to note before you put this down, it's very important to watch how this wire is ran. There's a cradle here on the side, and we need to make sure that the tabs on this white connector are facing outward to the edge of the navigation head, just like this. It's going to sit nice and flush down in here, just like that. The front of the wire coming off here is going to lay in this middle slot. And on the back side of the cradle, this is very important. The backs of the wire, you need to use your finger and line up the wire into the cradle before you push it down. This is very important because if you run your brass screw through here, when we screw this back down and that wire is overlapping, we're going to damage the wire. So we need to be very careful that we use our finger and push down as we put this navigation head down, just like this, to avoid the screw going through the wire. All right, now we're ready to tighten back the brass screws with our number 2 Phillips screwdriver. All right, now remember, when we're tightening our 7 brass screws, we are going to be working in a star pattern to make sure everything seats evenly. And now we are ready to install our new pull rope. Carefully use a Phillips screwdriver to make a hole through the rope so the other end can be ran through. The rope needs to be tied directly on the lock bar to the right of the wheels. Now that we have the rope routed around the lock bar, it's time to take the heat shrink in and feed it through the hole we created with the Phillips screwdriver. Now take the end of your rope and route it around the top of the stationary pin and back underneath the middle wheel. Use a pair of needle nose pliers to grab the end of the rope and pull towards you. Repeat the process back around the final wheel to the left. Now with the rope properly routed around the lock bar, use your routing tool to grab the end of the rope and bring it above the stationary pin and out the top of the rope retainer. Now with the rope properly fed through the rope retainer, feed the end of your rope through the bottom of the rope handle and out the top. From here, tie a knot at the very end of your rope and pull the rope back down, bringing the knot through the top of the hole. The final step is to take the rope handle cap and press it down tightly to the top of the handle. And that is how you replace your steering motor housing on your Power Pole Move ZR. Thank you for watching.